Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of What Makes It Tick. Today, we're going to talk about Mark Roberts motion controls software and all the goods and gobs of everything that they have in their product line on the broadcast side. We're not even going to touch the MoCo side, which is kind of where they're known for. MoCo meaning motion capture and everything. So we're going to talk about the broadcast side. That's where I've been heavily involved with. And we have some toys to show. So we're going to start with how the interface and things like that work. So I'm going to share my screen, and this will be a smaller screen for you guys just because I care, and I'm not going to show you the really big 4K that's in front of me. So this is the user interface, more or less, of the software. I'm going to go ahead and close out of it, though, just so you have an idea of where it starts at. So in the very beginning, we have the launcher, as they call it. The launcher then launches either the chat client or the old MHC software. The MHC software is not the one that has the tracking and all the really fun stuff in it. So this is, we practically all we run the Polymotion chat is it. And they call it chat because it's like for people in around that are around, as they said, around a pub chatting. They're from the UK, so go figure. Whenever I launch it from here, it starts another program that is their server, which is here, and that server is what's talking to the cameras. And then this is the other the little goodness right here is the tracking side. It's called CV Engine for computer vision engine. So it does work off of computer vision. And then the actual client itself here, whenever I log in it, this is normally the interface. And so they have this kind of simplified interface of everything. And the one thing about it is it does have a lot of capabilities, and they're trying to simplify it. But at the same time, they don't want to take away things. So if for some users, it might be, just perfect for what we have. But for other people, you're probably going to want a little bit more. So that's when we click the little arrow, and then we take it into what's more, and that would be here. And so I select the camera I want, and then as you can see, I'm mousing around because I'm very commonly having to tech things that are in the field without having a controller. So I'm actually pretty adept at using the mouse, and it makes it pretty easily accessible. There's a controller for like a virtual joystick here, and the parts that really kind of come into play are whatever, since it's got an autofocus on this BTZ that I'm on. This is a UE150, and what I'm pointing at right now is our kind of our flagship. This is the UE, I'm sorry, the AFC 100, not the UE Panasonic side. So I'm gonna go to configure real quick and grab me a preset there. Okay, so that way I don't have to go back and reframe it in a minute. So I'm going to go through that AFC 100. And currently, as you can see across the back of it, there's a whole bunch of connections here. These connections are the inputs, inputs and outputs connections, along with the camera here. Oh, thank you, Jarrett. And the camera has the video out of it. Currently, I'm just taking a regular HD SDI out right now. And then I'm going down to a bird dog that's on the floor here. Because power comes from the head itself. So we power the head, and the head powers off a 24-volt DC. So that's this cable right here. And it's kind of weird in that cable it's a 3-pin. And I really didn't like that at first. Because it was like, okay, somebody's from audio is gonna really screw up my world, right? For either one putting 48 volts into this, or we're gonna get some audio into our camera feed for power. But it hasn't happened. We've just been really careful about it. And we have specific looms built in our normal operations that come off of our boxes. So we power it up from here. We take the 4-pin over for power. Network goes in also, and then there's a small switch inside. And that switch, so here's the network going in. This switch is jumping out and over into the camera head itself. And so that allows us to control every feature that's in the camera, just as if it's sitting on the network. It's just another device on the network at that point. And so the last thing, the most important thing for this one is the lens cable here. Jared, would you spin the camera around so we can see where it plugs in? And so, okay, thank you. So right here, is where it plugs in on the bottom of the actual camera, and that's talking directly to the lens for control. So it's not talking through the camera or anything like that. It's talking directly from the lens from the actual head here. That's a key thing, because the lenses that we actually are using are the Fujinon BERD. So the BERD is a serial lens, which is both a servo on focus and zoom. Of course, iris is also electrically controlled too, and that's going through the camera interface, not the lens. So that is how our cameras are set up normally in this fashion. And this camera, this head, there's two versions of the AFC 100. This one that we have does not do a full 360. I didn't feel a need for the extra cost in it, but they do have a model that does. And the other reason is because we were actually doing 12G or 4K out of the camera. It's called a slip ring that's on the base of it. And it's really cool. It simplifies a lot of the GAC cabling that we have to deal with. But this was the best route for us because we were doing 4K. So I had an extra 4 SDIs coming down, and they didn't have anything that was 12G capable in that slip ring. And so it's not a pass through. It actually is, it's like a turntable ring that's under the bottom of it. But the ones that can do a full 360, those are kind of cool for whenever you need it. So we do have a maximum destination. So we can do effectively 350 degrees around, as long as somebody doesn't tie the cables too tight. So that's always an issue. Ask me how I know. Too many times. So you can kind of see an idea as Jared's moving it around now of what it's doing. The biggest challenge that we have is in differentiate myself. Sorry for the head. One of the bigger things is we have these are robotics. The difference between that is this is a currently now about a $15,000 US head. So I don't even actually remember what it is in pounds, but the last time I looked at it, it was right about 15,000. So just for the head, the camera that's on it is about 25,000, and the list, and then the lens itself is around 30 when we purchased them. So that kind of gives you an idea of the level of where this is at. It is a full 4K camera. It is capable of doing 2160p 60. So that is kind of how we approached this project that we were working on, which was at the time tennis. The difference in a robotic versus a PTZ is the motion, without a doubt. How good the motors are, how fine-tuned you can really make them. And so that's what we'll kind of look at a little bit now. This is where this software really shines. As I go into preferences on the share, you can see here, this is the UE 150s, but I'm gonna go back a couple to I can see the AFC 100. So on this one, I have pan, tilt, focus, zoom, iris. Every one of these sliders allow me to fine tune exactly what speed they are doing. And then I have a master manual speed here that also overrides everything else that the other sliders are doing. So it's kind of like everything feeds up into the master speed, and depending on where your master speed is, you kind of get your feeling of where you're going, and then you bring your master speed up and down depending on if you're at the end of your lens. If you need to move a little slower, you drop the master speed down, and then if you're at the wide, you can pretty much crank things up and go pretty fast. And the reason that it's called a AFC 100, it's 100 degrees per second. That's the speed. So the next model up from this is 180. So they're AFC 100s. I'm sorry, AFC 180s. So they're even faster. And that's from point to point all the way, being able to move around. So Jared, could you do me a close up of the actual controller that you're at in there? And I'm going to switch that over to you so we can see it. And get a little bit closer into it if you can on that PTC. And so on there, I got you. So we have a couple different controllers set up currently. This is the big boy here. It's somewhere around 7,000-8,000. Now that is Yeah, about 8, I think it is, maybe 9. I haven't. It's been a while since I bought them, so and hadn't need to know. The big difference on this one, as you can see, it has 2 joysticks, and the reason it has 2 joysticks is I'll show you later. Is we can also do other axes or axes. Uh, the other part of this is all those preferences. You see the sliders at the top that are lit up. Those sliders allow you, you can actually adjust the preferences on the fly without going into the software. So they really kind of designed this controller to be an all-in-one do-it-all. You've got a separate focus rocker, roller, and then the rocker for the zoom. So if you wanted to use the old-fashioned way of doing it with 2 hands, I practically never ever do that. I got away from doing it because we are doing switching with our left hands and driving with our rights. Or if somebody's ambidextrous like I am, I will switch with my right hand and drive the camera with my left. The zoom can be affected by the joystick, so you twist the joystick in order to zoom in or zoom out. So it becomes, at first, some people really can't deal with it. And because of where we were shooting and doing a lot of tennis, our depth of field didn't change. Whether we're shooting across or we're shooting at the baseline, it was effectively the same distance. So we didn't have to pull focus in and out. And then also we would use presets as also. So there was a lot of that we were doing. You can see the big T in the middle. That's not for wiping or blowing up the Death Star, that or the Alderaan. That is actually the master speed. So it's really handy on this controller to be able to just slap it up with your wrist or with an extra finger there as you're moving around. Top right is the actual buttons for no, that's the red button is the oh crap. It's everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Press that button, it kills power and kills the server sending out messages. So that every once in a while, especially when you're using the big robots, very, very crucial. And this controller can actually it can drive a full range of different devices. It's not just for PTZ or PTZ type controllers. Top right is camera selection, so you can easily get to which camera you want to go to. And in the middle are OLED type buttons that are lit up, and LCDs behind them, I believe. Maybe LCD, maybe not OLED, I'm not sure, but they'll show you what you labeled those presets at. So it's a very easy way. The way they design their system is it's a client and a server. And so the server runs, it can run on the same machine as a client. It's not very heavy, but in the way we work it is with the servers running on site. And then we take that next step and we go into using the client remotely. So we can have multiple clients that are talking to one server that's talking to multiple heads. So that's kind of the difference between those. Let me show you. Hold on, Jerry. This guy here, this little one, as you can see, is one of the first ones we got, and is very compact and everything. The bottom here is iris, so it's a little hard to. I got big hands, so every once in a while I'll bump it as I'm driving around because I like to hold it kind of like here, and so the iris knob is underneath. These are for presets. And then all these buttons is another thing too. I'll show you is all these buttons can easily be reprogrammed. So if you want them to do a certain function, if I wanted this to be like these two to be focus bumps, I could be that. If I want them to be positionals, I could be positions, presets. If I want them to move a rail forward and backward, they could do that also. The switches up here, in case you're wondering, forward, off, and reverse. That means you can flip the axis if you need to real quickly. So you don't have to go into the software to do it. And then this is the master overall speed here. This button, you kind of hear it, that it's a clicker. And so every time you click is another camera. And so that's how you can just really easily move between the cameras. We also, as I said, on the programming side, so the controller mapping here. So this machine, I'm attached to the broadcast panel, which is on the other side. As all the analog inputs, Jared, go ahead and move around your inputs so we can see them. So as he's moving it around, each one of those are doing what they do, and we can identify where they are. We can assign accesses to those. Depending on if it's an analog input or buttons, incremental inputs would be something like the focus wheel, because it's an infinite roll. So it's a pot inside that infinitely rolls type. And then the buttons part, this is where it gets kind of like you get really deep in the weeds, but it really makes it easy if we need to reprogram, like on the small controller, we reprogram it all the time to be certain functions out of it. So instead of just pulling a preset that I want to go to a certain direction, a certain framing or whatever, I would actually be able to assign it to do, like I said, turn on and off tracking, all those other functions, select the cameras. It's just a very flexible software. So you're really not limited to just doing one thing with it one way, which is kind of how one of the things I really like about it. And then over here in the robot, talk about really deep in the weeds. Try not to adjust these things if I can avoid it. But in here, you can see I can change maximum velocity, acceleration, positioning. So if I wanted to also prevent a head from going too far, like if it was up next to a wall or something and I don't want to slap the wall, I could tell it, this is my maximum, this is my minimum, stay in this area. That's it. The acceleration, of course, everything that you could imagine that you would want to ever get deep in and adjust, it's there on every axis: pan, tilt, focus, zoom, and iris whenever you need to. It just all depends on how deep the PTZs themselves. So like we're using the UE150s with it right now. Those PTZs don't have a lot of that same functionality, but the AFC 100 has it all. And then so let's go to the next thing. This they spell weird. I don't know why. They don't know how to. I mean, they're from England. They should know how to spell color, but they can't. This is specifically for the guys that are running. The other thing is they don't know how to say the company that bought them, which is Nikon. They say Nikon. So the Nikon company that owns Mark Roberts and has for a few years now, they were partnered with Nikon before they actually were purchased. And so when they were partners, they were running with those DSLRs. And so that's why these color controls is they would use these for the Olympics. They have a specific one called the pod that they could put a DSLR. I can't remember the part number on that Nikon at the time or Nikon, but there was a specific one that would go in there with a good long lens, fully waterproof, and they would put it up at the top of structures, and then they could go in and paint it and control it this way. And then they had servos that were running the lens back and forth inside. On this software, we do have face capture too. So we'll go back and kind of show some of that. I'm definitely going to need a model. Jarrett, actually, sorry, Chris, would you mind walking back and forth, forward and backward next to the rail? So Jarrett's going to help drive a little bit. And as Chris comes around, you can see, okay, so zoom back out, Jarrett, and move the rail back as it gets framing. Okay, so now it's picking up, the computer vision's picking up the bone structure. So it identifies, you see the white dot that's on there. So that, okay, Chris, so stop there and step backwards about 5 steps. And so it's pulling this whole bone structure, top to bottom. It's measuring shoulders. It's measuring eyes distance. It's measuring top down sternum to eyes also. And it's using that in part of its algorithm, not only to do the tracking, but it's also using it in order to identify that person. The next step after that is the face recognition part. The only problem I have with the face recognition part is I have to train it. So I have to sit there and do multiple shots of a face. I was doing sports. I was like, I can't make an athlete come in and just say, stand there for 5 minutes while I get your face trained. So I never really used the face training that much. But if you were using this in a corporate environment or somewhere that you, or on stage, that type of thing, you could use that and then give a little bit more control to the software to identify who's the most important, the VIP. That's part of the shot. So now as Chris is moving around, you can see the framing is already picked up on him. Jared, go ahead and take the other PTZ and show them what we're shooting with. Okay, move back, Chris. Now you notice it's going to keep his eye. And now this is what we're shooting him with. So this is one of our rails. This is a short one. This is a 20-foot one. We could extend this out, not indefinitely, but a long way. We've got the math and the parts and stuff figured out to do it up to 300 feet. So it could really stretch the length of a football field. That was the reason why we did 300 feet. Jared, go ahead and stay on that camera. Let me see if I can get that camera up off of here. Yeah, there we go. All right, go ahead and move that camera, the rail part, Jared. And the rail is actually, so it's the rail along with the column that's on top of it, and then below it is, oh, we're going to do manually. Below it is 80/20. So the rail is made out of aluminum extrusion, and then it actually rides on two linear bearings that are on top of the 80/20. And so those can hold, like, it's insane. It's like 400 pounds per linear bearing. There's 4 of them. So capacity wise, it could hold a lot of weight. The column itself is a 75-pound column in weight wise. And so and no, I can't track it with the camera because it only sees people. So as they're going around, you notice it's picking up Jared on the share there. You can kind of see what it's doing. And whether it's making that move on the rail, forward and backward, side to side, wherever we don't have a lot of space here in this long haul room that we're in, but whether we're actually tracking at the same time, it will stay on that person wherever they are, unless they get Jared in front of them. All right, so now see the white dot, it's picked up Chris where he is. All right, Jared, so do a push in with the rail and just let it follow in. And so all this time it's doing the calculations, it's doing all the math, and it's going to stay. Now this one is only doing it where the lens is staying at the same place. And so there's different settings in the tracking also. So if I wanted to say, you can see the little icons at the top. I want one person. And then I could say I want a tight shot, or if I wanted more of a medium shot here. All right, now you can move it in and out, and now it'll stay. All right, Chris, move around. And so now it's going to follow in and cut back and forth. So it's not staying in a specific area. It is following his bone structure wherever he was. Now turn around, Chris. And it'll flip around. It doesn't have to have a face. So it's not using facial recognition at this point to stay on him. It's using the bone structure. And I wish we had more space, but we don't here. Whenever I go back to this other one here, I can actually really customize whether or not. So this inner circle here is where he's staying in of. All right, Chris, move to your left a little bit, please. And then the outer zone. Notice it's out of that outer zone. And so it's going to center up on this person. And whether I need more headroom or less headroom is why I'm moving that around. So all right, keep moving around, Chris. And so then as he exits the inner circle is kind of the deadpan. They call it dead spot. Then it's going to move because he's out of sight of that into the outer, and until it finds him. Now, if he moves really fast, Chris doesn't move really fast though, but if Chris moved really fast or just disappear, go behind the magic curtain, Chris. There, turn red. So I could set a preset so that whenever it does turn red, I don't have any presets set. Whenever it does lose that person or that primary VIP, it'll fall back to a specific shot, say frame the stage, if I was shooting a stage. So it's pretty handy in that aspect. As you notice in the user interface, a lot of it's very touch friendly, and they designed it like that. Like the first computer I got, because they sold me with the system a computer, it was a Microsoft Touch. the little tablet. Yeah, I got like 4 of them sitting around I never touch. So they're just they Surface, sorry, yeah, Microsoft Surface. Um, they just didn't last for us on the road. So we moved it to, and also when we started doing the tracking, we needed real servers with more processing. So the Surface will work really well in the situation if you have single camera use and things. But if you're doing tracking, they don't have enough. They use GPU. So with the GPU, you need that capability. So that's kind of the general ideas behind this. One of the things, I'll go out to the admin side and I can show you a little bit more. So these are the cameras that are logged in. And for each one of these, you pick what type of camera it is. And you can kind of see, or the device, whatever it is. So this is at the top. So the AFC 100s, the 180s. Oh, and there's a roll too. That's a really cool one. So not only would do 360, but the camera itself will roll this way. So that one's expensive, to say the least. The one, this auto jib that's listed in here, I haven't got that yet, but it's a small jib that's fully automated, like 20-foot jib. So that one's pretty cool. Then the rails, which we have down, we say down there. Pan bars, I'm gonna get to that in a second. They see which other one would be fun. The Ulti head, that's a big one. That's like I could put a box lens on it. It has enough weight. It'll hold 100 pounds payload. Actually, 150 pounds payload. So 75 kilograms, I think. And yeah, Unreal Simulator. Yeah, it actually plugs into Unreal. So you can get data off of Unreal or spin data back into Unreal. Because all this is all that's the thing about them. It's like if I pull a preset, it goes to that preset no matter what. It's like it's spot on within millimeters. It doesn't drift or anything like that. The Visca series is kind of like the generic. So all the bottom down here is like the PTZs and stuff like that. But this is the administration side, and then you can set up operators. So if I have someone that's not truly technical, I could keep them from seeing all those other menus and getting into the weeds, so they can't touch the robots and screw up something. They can't touch the particulars. They just have to sit down and wiggle and waggle the joystick. That's all they can do. So that's kind of the basics behind it. And then I told you about controller mapping. These are the users, so I can assign everybody has a username. So all presets are with that user. So not only presets, but all speeds, all orientation, every piece is all part of that single username. And it's password protected and everything like that. And then the chat wizard, that's where we go through and we set it up to train it effectively to say, okay, this is left, this is right, this is up, this is down, this is zoom in, this is zoom out. And then that trains the AI system that's in it. Okay, I said AI, it's not truly an AI, the computer vision system. The computer vision system then at that point knows what's going on. So now that is pretty much everything on the controller side or the software side. I will show you one of the old school controllers. So let me get into that. I didn't go through the trouble of hooking it up because it is kind of a pain. Jared, if you would help me with the camera that's in here and focus in on the pan bar, Chris, if you'll hand me the pan bar setup. Okay, so the pan bar setup is what I call old school because it's that feeling that a lot of people that are camera operators want to see here that they have. So Jared's going to swing over the camera on this guy. Watch your head, Chris. So this, can you see this one here? Okay. So this head is a Cortoni head, and it actually has encoders built inside. So every time I move up, I move down, I move left, I move right, it's reporting that information back into the system. That is then interpolated and sent out to the head itself. So as I'm sitting down here, my focus, my zoom, everything that is I'm moving around, you feel like you're actually sitting behind a camera like a studio camera. That's to a lot of people necessary. For me, the issue, you notice the width on this, it's almost 3 foot. It's a little extended out right now than it should be. but I usually have a little bit tighter, maybe about right here. But because of to get it to feel right, and it does have drag and everything, just like a normal tripod head would have on it. But it just took up too much space. See how much space it takes from side to side? That's the part that I never really could deploy this in our small trucks, trailers, and everything. It was just a little bit harder. But it's cool. Is it worth $20,000? No, no, I wouldn't feel like that. I think they're less now. They're only 16, 15 or 16. But still, some people, it's got to be this. It's got to be. And I wasn't necessarily one of those people. After we got around to getting it working and everything like that. Now, for the big box cameras, that is probably where we would end up with something like this, just because their body used to moving around and stuff. So we might use it for that. But I'd take a joystick any day. I just find it easier and faster. So, and this is IP also. So that's the other side of it. Whenever I started down this path and going with Mark Roberts, is I looked at telemetrics. I looked at what's the other one? Bradley is another one. Let's see, what's the other one that who looked at that was deep, better ones. Furio, or what's now Furio, used to be can't remember. It was a Japanese company that Ross bought up. But the quality in those, and the especially the telemetrics, I really wanted to go American made, but I couldn't, because for us to go down as far as we were, it was at least 500 feet, if not 1,000 feet, to any of our courts that we were doing tennis still here, right? So because we were going so far, I needed IP stuff, and I needed to be able to shoot it over fiber. And that's where we really were. This is before PTZs were really heavily available, that weren't just Visco that you were trying to do over either IP or over copper. So we moved into this realm, and Mark Roberts was one of the first that I found that was true IP. So whenever I went over, I actually went over to the UK before I spent all the money and everything, and it kind of interviewed them. I wanted to see their operations. I wanted to see how things worked, and it was well worth the trip, because they were able to show me, really hands-on of this is how it works. And it was good. It was good learning experience for us. And then one of the guys says to me, he goes, yeah, there's IP. It was like, well, I just wanted to get the guys off the court. I want to get my operators off the court and have them work from inside our air-conditioned tour bus. It just seemed like a dream, right? They wouldn't have to cook. They could just work there and be nice and comfortable and everything. And that was the dream. Then this guy goes, well, in his English accent that I'm not going to try to imitate. Well, we were doing this race course. It's 100 miles away from here, but we were controlling the camera from here at the office. I'm like, tell me more. And right there, I was pulling my checkbook out. I was sold. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And so we worked with them at the very beginning and deploying a lot of their solutions. And that's where we ended up with a big part of our investment going towards these cameras and such, because it just becomes addictive once you have good control and good cameras. It becomes addictive and making things easier on yourselves. So that's how we ended up in Mark Roberts 7 years ago now. That's my spiel, guys. Tell me you have some questions. I know you got to have some. Besides the simple things like how much does it cost? I think I pretty much touched on most of that.
Dude, this is awesome. If you were to do it all over today, what would you get now? I mean, FR7s at their Sony booth, they showed that same type of tripod. I can't remember the name of the company. It was a third party. Greg Gibson's gone deep into the FR7 ecosystem, bought 3 of them. And
for me, it's also the right tool for the job too, right?
Yeah.
It's always that. And so here's the one. This one I found, RCT is, and it's this. Yep. So I found them, and I was like, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. And they'll work with any fluid head, any PTZ, for all PTZ cameras. So, and this one was about $8,000 or $9,000. for this
Yeah.
control solution. So that's pretty good. And it's more of a singular thing. But see, here's the thing for me, can it work long distances? And that's where we've really perfected that because of this unique way that Mark Roberts does the server and user interface, the client talking to the server. We trunk that down a VPN in the back, and then from that point we can securely control those cameras. And it becomes, I mean, it's like it's second nature. I don't even think about it. It literally feels like you're there. It's maybe a small amount of latency, but it's nothing that's a deal breaker. So everybody else I look at, I kind of think of that also, guy. So if I was to do it over right now, the one that's really piquing my interest, and in specifically because of their interface, is Air. Have you seen those also? Air
Oh, is it?
cameras,
Yeah.
it's
The one
using
that
either
has
a
micro four thirds.
exactly, yeah, it has a Z cam in it
Dcam. Yeah.
or a BGH, so which I have like 8 of. So the BGHs are very handy, and the big one they just rolled out is a compatibility with one of the Sonys. I can't remember. I'm not a really big Sony DSLR fan, so it's one of their new Sony DSLRs that they're integrating into that. The one thing about their platform is it's more than just camera control. It's like an administration platform. There's got a lot of pluses I feel in their platform of what they have to offer. So that's the one right now I'd probably consider. There again, they're still $9,000 to $10,000 per kit.
There
And
was another one that we looked at Infocom. David Brady had me push the card over to that booth. It was called like Elco or Elcon, something like that. You know what I'm talking about? I'll dig up the video and find it, but it was about 10 grand and it could pick up they had a Black Magic Ursa Mini on there with a
yeah,
Fujinon lens, and it was tossing around no problem.
yeah, for me, it's just so simple to be able to, like, for the AFC 100s particularly, they do have to have power close by. It's 24 volts, so that's not common. I actually was talking with Daniel Whitner, is that right, Greg? Whitner, and
Whitnar
Daniel,
with broadcast gear.
yeah, and so he and I were talking, and by the way, did anybody see Tomorrowland this past weekend? He was shooting that with his truck. That was amazing, by the way. Get on the YouTubes, look up Tomorrowland 2024. It was amazing. All right, side shot. All right, now back. So Daniel and I were talking because he has a PTZ base that goes underneath the UE 150s, and it's really slick. It has the fiber converters in it, and it converts from SMPTE and powers the PoE and everything else for the camera. At first, I was anti-SMPTE. I was just like, I don't need to spend that money. I don't need to do this. After you roll SMPTE up, you really hate it. But I wasn't having to roll cables, so I got better at it, and not hating it as much. But the key is with the SMPTE is I can send power, I can send control, I can see telemetrics, all the telemetry, everything is coming down that one cable. It's amazing. And so
Did you see the new version
of his,
where he put the 4-channel fiber mux in there, so you get 4 SDI in and out and your PTZ all on the same puck base, all on one SMPTE cable.
so
you can put monitors and POVs and whatever else you want that's
so you
nearby
can
your
break out
PTZ
different things.
Yeah, it's very sexy.
Yeah. And so I started looking at that with him, and that I was hoping he would be able to do it, but he doesn't have the didn't feel like it was worth his time or the certifications to be able to do the AFC 100, which does 24 volts. So SMPTE sometimes can run as high as 200, 300 volts, I think. 400. Okay. Depending on the manufacturer. And so you have to have two ends that talk at that voltage, and then it drops down on the end at the end point to whatever you need, 12 volts, 24 volts, 48 volts, whatever. So that's one of my biggest things about doing some of the events that we have coming up is I'm trying to think of what's the easiest way to get in, set it up. Right now, we go in and we drop a Pelican box. The Pelican box then has power at 110 go into it. Then we take a snake off of that, an umbilical. that then powers the camera. So it powers the head with the 24 volts, powers the camera off of 12 volts, and then does SDI back into a converter, usually NDI, because that's the way I like. And then the fourth would be Ethernet control of the actual system. So there's 4 cables in that loom usually, and it's simple enough for most of our action that we're doing. And that box is weatherproof also. So we could hang it on the side of a court and didn't have to worry about it. So that's how we developed this workflow. I would love for us to be able to move to do that, where all the power is coming from the truck down empty, and that would be my druthers of what I would like, I guess. But there's not a lot of availability in that at this power point that it needs, because there's a lot of power that head swinging around. It'll hold these heads. I think the 100s are maxed out at somewhere around 20, 25, 26 pounds. So our bigger cameras, our UC 4000s, which are traditional ENG size SMPTE cameras, we've ran them on here, and it's just as smooth and just as capable as the UB300s that are on there now, the box cameras. So next question.
Actually, I found that brand that I was trying to think of. It's Enco Rushworks PTX. They're in Texas. You know those guys?
Okay, so let's talk about that. That opened up where I didn't want it. Okay, so yeah, they are Rushworks is classic at finding stuff and then rebranding it. as many are in this business, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this was something. They had one that was actually DMX controlled also, and so it was a head. It was just basically a moving light without the light. And so for the longest time, they were selling a lot of those, but DMX doesn't have the resolution that these kind of things have. So
It says that it's VSCO over IP.
Yeah. So this one I haven't looked at deeply, mostly because of platforming, and it didn't exist at the time. Yeah. I have dealt with, but that's pretty large footprint too. This fits on a head or in a mount that we have some mounts that, do you think you can put your hand on one of those mounts? The Mitchell mounts that were sitting in there, in the boxes that have the 2 clamps on them. We'll see if Chris can find it. He's really good at that. So the mounting part is another thing that we've kind of mastered is on this specific head, it's just on a 100 millimeter ball head. And so it's a 3/8 in the bottom. It is compatible with Mitchell, if you're familiar with the Mitchell mounts. So we have Mitchell mount versions for it too that we could put onto just about anything. So it's just the flexibility in that. But no, my biggest thing is also the customer service as always, right? I have, oh yeah, here's a little mount that we bought for trusses and scaffolding. So this is a Mitchell here, and thanks, Jared. He hates Mitchell. He hates them. And then this is the clamps that goes on it, so you can put it wherever you need it, space things out, and clamp it off with 2 secure points. This is these things are so heavy in comparison. This is the actual head part that, and one thing I love about it, it's got a nice little level bubble here. So this is the castle here. So this goes down through that mount I just showed you, and then the castle nut tightens up on it, and then the head is actually tightened to this. So it makes it really easy to move things in and out. The one we just got that is a little bit, I don't know about yet, but I figured I need to have it in the arsenal, is this guy, and it has these wire loops all the way around. So this part is completely isolated from this part, and I can't really show you how much it's moving, but it's moving like 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch as I'm twisting it around. So the idea is vibration, right? So if this is down on something, then the vibration head, this should help level that out some. We put it on the rail this morning. Didn't work. It was just like it was fighting the whole time. You could sense the movement. It was just sitting there like jelly, and it just didn't work as well. So we're gonna have to do some engineering. But if we have somewhere that, say, there's a shake, you know, or just go to the hardware box, grab this and put it in between this other mount because it's all, you know, interfacing, all the Mitchell pieces all kind of interface and or they should all match each other. That's one of the reasons Jared doesn't really like it. Jared's my son, by the way. Jared doesn't like it because I was like, hey, no, here's these Mitchell pieces, put them together. He goes, Dad, they don't fit. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, we got them from the same company and they're all Mitchell. Okay, so Pro Aim, speaking of someone that puts their names on other people's stuff or just straight up steals their designs and then makes their own version of it, they don't apparently understand what a micrometer is or any kind of CAD software either. So this is supposed to be, this is the head here. This is supposed to be matched up with a Mitchell. This is actually was working on a Mitchell head, Mitchell tripod heads that we had. And we got these other quick pieces that were quote Mitchell. Yeah, they didn't work. So we're kind of going back and forth with them now to figure it out, but we've got a better solution now, and it's just about flexibility of being able to throw them up. These boxes are these will you bring me one of the green covers, the weather covers? I think it should be one in the box. These AFC 100s are not exactly weatherproof, but they're weather resistant, and that's another thing too for us that was doing lots of live sports outdoors. Yeah, it was one of those things. So they came with, we had these nice little rain covers and they're green so they could go to Wimbledon for the most part. And it just goes over the top of this.
Yeah, but it's not the right shade for Masters, just saying.
Yeah, you would have to, I'd have to redesign them. But that's basically just hangs over there and just keeps the water from going into the connectors. So they're not waterproof. If we were still doing tennis like we were, I would probably be moving forward, and I was going to build, for lack of a better word, a mailbox. There are DotWorks makes them. If you're ever looking for outdoor weatherproof cases for cameras, DotWorks they're the best. They have some really great ones. Some of them are really expensive. Most of them are worth the money. The one that we had to get for this thing to sit in was too big to sit on the head. After we put the camera in the weatherproof box, it wouldn't sit on the head, so it wouldn't fit. So our solution for outdoors is typical porta brace type rain gear. Pull it over, tuck it around, make sure it's not open.
When you getting an Agito?
Soon, actually. Very, very soon.
I didn't realize that Abel Cine rents those things. So if you just need one temporarily, Agito has them. All right.
Here's what I found out with when I started asking about that too, is whenever it comes down to rentals, like, oh yeah, we rent it. Oh, and you need the operator or the pilot or the whatever.
Oh, yeah, actually,
and,
yeah.
At $900 a day, you know, or at best $900 a day. So you have to factor those things in too. Yeah, but yeah, they're the bomb. Can't wait. So different one. Go ahead, JJ. Be careful, please.
So if you were apologies for the audio, if you were tracking a basketball game versus tennis, would this still be your preferred back end versus like something like Panasonic for tracking one particular player during a game?
Actually, that's a really good question. Okay, so where tracking works. For motion, absolutely, Mark Roberts hands down over Panasonic or any of the other solutions. If you need a professional, if you're doing a professional game or a college game that's suspecting a professional camera operations, the robotics can give you that with a good operator behind it. I will say that not everybody can make it look smooth. It does take some talent. If you were using tracking, multi-person tracking or multi-person sports like basketball, football, soccer / football, those are going to be hard. That's going to be really hard. They sort of work, but it doesn't have the algorithm. It's tuned for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people. If you have corporate events on stage, people, bands, and then tennis kind of applies to that because it's one person on the court, and it did matter if we had the bigger events, when we're doing the bigger events, we could not always use tracking because there were so many people there. And sometimes we have a fond name of our system. It's called Damn It. So sometimes Damn It just kind of did what he wanted to do, as all computer vision AI eventually does. It wasn't follow the bald guy. It was following like, ooh, ball boy. Let me just go fix the ball boy. No. Forget the 6'7" guy that's in front of the ball boy that you should be focused on the whole time. No, let's go find the ball boy and just see he's standing still. We'll just work on him for a while. Or the umpires, the lineups, and line referees. Those were the favorites that would be. So it'd be like, damn it, refocus. Damn it. So that was kind of our nickname for him, and he got a lot better. And he responds to other names a little more fondly now. But it's still useful. But when you come to the group sports, tracking's a long way to be able to be useful. The algorithms, like the guys at Pixelot are doing, they're using multiple cameras, and then they're doing virtual tracking within that. Their algorithms are considerably different.
So we saw we saw this tracking system track your face with unknown. If you actually put yourself in database, have you played with the Panasonic database and the Mark Roberts?
Yes. I just, as I was saying, I don't know if you heard me earlier, it's like with the face recognition, if I was doing something regular, like at Blues Studio at Sage, and we had somebody that was going to be on the stage for 2 or 3 days at a time, we would take the time to do the facial tracking at that point. And speaking of that guy, the Sage Studio has both Panasonic and Sony. So the Sony's there, he likes the look, and he shoot against an LED like I am right here too. But with the biggest of the biggest challenge with him is the Sony's move really slow in comparison to the Panasonics. And so the Panasonics actually track a lot better, but he likes the look of the Sony's much better. So it's that depth of field, and you don't see the moire near as easy. Both his studios are exact same size at 22 by 20 feet. So there's not a whole lot of space to move people around and all, but that's kind of where he's ended up. And I personally, I am a Sony fan. I'm just not a Sony FR7 fan for the limitations that they give me for sports applications. Anybody else?
So with the tracking, can you tell it to ignore people?
It does have the ability. Let me see if I can make.
So once you identify someone, put it on a do not follow list.
Not as such like that, but if you have multiple people in the shot, for instance, you can actually click with the either touch screen or the mouse. You can click on the person you want as the VIP, and they get the white dot, and then it will stay with that person because it knows their bone structure. It recognizes, everybody's a little different. So it recognizes their shoulder width, their eyes width, and things like that. So that's its key. Now, if you do have the facial recognition done, it will basically ignore everybody else. Now, if you had two people with the faces recognized, I'm not sure. I think you would still have to select between the two. Yeah. But that's actually a good point, Robert. I'll need to ask them if there's a never go to this person option.
Which speaks to your ball boy problem.
Yeah, it was a hit and miss. I tell you, one of the times we really got it confused was it was Atlanta Open, and they had a LED wall behind the court, and so we were seeing a lot of moire and stuff. It was a terrible resolution. It wasn't near as tight as this one. And so as we were shooting across, it was I think it was Eisner, I believe, but we were shooting across, we could see him, and then they were taking our feed and putting it back into the LED wall. And so the camera was seeing the same person twice. Didn't work at all. It was just like, and it was the same bone structure. It literally was like the same size. I was like, well, you can't get any worse situation than that. But at those times we were just trying to make it through the day. after that. But yeah, that was probably the worst I've seen of getting it confused. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything you want to see, dig into? I mean, it does presets. Presets can be tracking. Presets can be locations. It's boring, but I use presets extensively. Whenever I'm doing a show and I'm actually running cameras, I use presets in my mind of, okay, I wanted this general area, and then I take over manual control from there. I want this general area, I take over manual control. And then sometimes it's just, okay, it's like tennis. I was like, I go to the baseline, turn on tracking. He's already at the baseline because they have specific places they'll stand on the baseline when they were in tennis. And so it was really easy to pick them up at those spots. And so I use presets for that. A lot of my guys, they never touch them. They may have two. You know, it's like one at the baseline, one at the net, maybe one at the chair, 3. I'd end up with like 20. But and then I would just kind of think in my mind, I'd lay them out in an order of how I would want them to be. Some might be a wide shot preset, some might be a tight shot. And the thing is with this is I can tell it to go in preset to preset fast. So it can go faster than, like, if you're trying to follow somebody, you're usually taking the master speed and dumping it down to 50%, maybe 30% even. So I'm trying to be deliberate. I'm trying to be slow if I'm following somebody. But if I want to get to a position, that could be an independent speed. That's independent of how fast I want to pick that position up. So if I wanted it to be a nice sweeping, I could program that in. Let me show you a little bit more of some of those things on the actual app, and there. Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to ask, so you don't run that, it seems like you open it up when you want to go quick in between presets, but otherwise you normally run it down 50, 60% as a rule?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then at any time, if I needed to go full speed, I just flip the knob up or flip the fader up on that controller. It's the fader. So this is the fun, as I call it. So the moves here, now this I can add in and start adding in different moves besides the presets themselves. And you notice all the different things that parameters I can change. So if I wanted to do an image, and that's one thing I do like about the software-based side of it too, is it's an image and it's very easy to see exactly, where am I going? What's my next framing and things like that. So if I went down to here and I configure, store capture image, and I could rename it if I wanted to. And then if I wanted to take these into moves, I also can do that. So from preset to preset, and there. I'm not sure why that's not doing it. Okay, this one doesn't support it. But I also can do, I'm not sure I'm having a glare here. I can't really see it. But here I could actually go between these two presets of locations. Jared, did you just take over? I made it mad. So I'm NDI monitoring into it. I made it mad. And usually whenever we're going from preset to preset, it's just, go speed to speed. But if I wanted to grab the moves, I could actually tell it to go from move position A to position 2, take 5 seconds. Or if I wanted to go position 1 to position 2, take 5 seconds there, but in position 3, go 15 seconds. And so you can adjust that curve of where it's moving and from preset to preset where it needs to go. And so it gets really deep in that aspect, and you can make some really elaborate things. So especially adding the rail, because it actually knows where it is on the rail. It'll actually move between those positions on the rail also. So really powerful when you start thinking about bigger things. I've been talking to my boy Joe, and we've been working on it. And before too long, we're going to have an interface as an API type interface. Jared's got it now. The API interface will allow us. So this is where we can go in and put in the positions. And like I say, there's 8 different steps you could put into that one move if you wanted to. So think of it as like if you wanted to program an opening or you wanted to program a certain thing to go to break, you could program all those different pieces into that move and then call back that move at the one button press. But Joe and I have been working with them for quite a while. Their API interface is kind of different, but Joe's just about got it cracked. And so one of the things we're going to be able to do is call the presets that are in the Mark Roberts software from Central Control. So not only just the movement part, which is it's kind of actually, I don't really care so much about that, but the ability to call the moves is really big to me, because then I could build that into his timelines, and now I could orchestrate an opening without having to worry about, are we going to hit those cues at certain times? So you can really time it out to wherever it needs to be. So that's kind of the ins and outs of that. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, can you accelerate and decelerate those moves? Is that possible?
Yeah, so there's multiple in each move. You could give it the time, but you also can tell it the envelope, whether you want it to be quick going into it, or if you just want it to be a nice gradual logarithmic, like it just all depends on what you need. If you need a curve that just goes straight, or if you need a curve that kind of ramps into it and then slows down, you could do either of those. Yeah. So it's very flexible in that aspect. Okay. So one thing I didn't talk about comparison wise, this software can be had for $2,500. So just the software running one PTZ, $2,500. Compare that to a full-on hardware piece that has nowhere near the features, and that's full tracking capability. If you move up to the next version of which we're at now, it was 20 grand, but I could do 12 cameras. I could also do, it came with a server, and it's got more capabilities within it. You got the moves capabilities that are with their heads. So it was a big difference in cost, but starting out, they really they were at 4,500 and then they came down to 35. Now they're at $2,500 for one camera. You can add another camera on, I think, for another $1,000. So for the same cost as that Panasonic controller, JJ, that's the kind of the go-to with the dual joysticks, that same controller for the UE150s, same cost, you could do this. Yeah, and have real tracking and more capabilities within it too. So that's kind of where I land on that. Oh, Jared, do you have your Magic controller, the one you really like? All right, everybody knows what it is. He doesn't have one here. Go figure. Yep, you named it, JJ. Xbox 360. So of course my kid grows up as a gamer, right? And that was one of the things that they were like, oh, and you can just use an Xbox 360 controller. I'm like, no way. So that is Jared's go-to. Now we did find there are differences between there. So there's Xbox 360 originals. They had to be Microsoft at first. So that was like, had to be. So it was hard to find those. They came off the market. They added in the new code that they could use the Xbox One controllers, and then they have what is it Platinum or Elite, the Xbox One Elite controller, which on that one you can adjust the deadpans on the joysticks, and you can actually change out the knobs and customize it a little bit. It has more buttons and things. That guy nearly as smooth. If you're a gamer, it's nearly as smooth as this controller, as far as moving around. One thing I found out is this joystick is probably their suckiest joystick. This is actually the most common one, and this joystick is cost, because I had to replace like 2 or 3 of them already because we just wore them out. This joystick costs like $24. So it's kind of hurtful when the whole thing was $5 grand when I first bought it, and then I pulled it apart, pulled the part number on it. I'm like, are you kidding me? So we have like extra ones. But the ones that we've changed out in all our other controllers, we had them change out to Hall effects. So this controller is effectively, whenever you go this way, you're moving a pot. It's an analog pot. Going this way, this way, this way, this way. It's just 2 pots. So you're X and Y, and then there's a third pot for the twist. And so it's a very simple joystick. The Hall effect, the way they work is they're talking more digitally, and it's a very exact. And so all our other controllers, besides this one, all our other controllers are all Hall effects. And if you ever need to buy, say a Squirrel, for instance, don't ever get the cheap, the one that has these $25 joysticks in it. Get the Hall effects. It's worth the $200 increase, because the Hall effect will give you a better deadpan, and it will also give you more exact, without a doubt, more exact movement and smoother movement. It just has more data information in it. It's not just a variable that way. So, any other questions? Anybody else? Go.
When you were using that rail system,
Mhm.
if you ever used the full 300 feet, did you have it out overnight ever? What was your maintenance for that?
There's really not much on the really long runs. We have to move to a rack and pinion type setup. So currently right now, it's on a belt. And so the servo's riding back and forth on the belt, and we can only do about 100 foot on the belt because it's got to be tight. And so that would be one issue we would have if it's outdoors. But the rack and pinion system, yeah, you can pretty much go forever at that point. And it depends if you're doing wired video or wireless video too. Yeah. This one is, I forget, Jared kind of figured out the math. It's how fast did you say it was, like 3.5 miles an hour? Something like that. Okay, so just under 3 miles an hour. So for in its current setup. So it's not, what ends up being is it just gets to be too fast for the momentum, and the servos, this servo specifically spins out.
And did you ever use anything that gives you control of Z-axis?
Yeah, we're still working on that. On this, we built this rail, so this is all our design. It's similar. It's very similar to Mark Roberts, but it's our design and our build out. The Mark Roberts, the ones that we had that were like this, they're in the Sage studio, so they're 10 foot, 10-foot rails. We needed longer, so we have our readily available is 40 foot, and that works really well across the back. We were using it across the back for tennis court. So that worked out really well to go across the back. But that column will actually go 7 feet tall. So it's 3 sections. And currently right now it's we don't have that part enabled. It doesn't use a servo. It uses a stepper motor inside, and it's a worm gear. In the way they built it, it was not easy to interface with. So it doesn't have incremental control. So I could either go up, I can go down. That's it. So I could put a relay on it, but I wanted to, be able to ease up or ease down at a certain speed. And so we're going to retrofit it with full servo motors, and because this little box that's on the bottom there, that it actually can control multiple motors. And so that's how we would do it. Yeah. But for the most part, we, like, if you're at a stage, we were doing it at one of the recitals that we did for my wife. We had this across the front of the stage. We could motor it up, get it peak above the stage, and that's kind of where it stayed pretty much the whole time. We weren't really trying to, if I was doing a concert like we did with the Galaverse, that we were moving up and down. So that one was, it had a wireless control, so we could go up or down depending on what was happening on the stage. We they didn't want to use the rail because they had dancers moving up and down. So we set up the rail, then we took it down, and then we moved the rail, and then we put it back up, and it was a pain. But we took the column off and built a base for it and put it at the nose of the stage. So it was like a V. And so that's so we could get an ISO shot when somebody was speaking. And then, 6 foot, like 72 inches plus the head that was right there in the front of them. And it worked out really well. And these columns, columns are not cheap, but these were about $5,000 compared to the ones from Mark Roberts were like 20. So this made sense. I could deal with the up and down until I can retrofit it. So we've got a friend that has a 3D printer, and we're working on the designs to be able to build out exactly what we need to put the servo in there. It's not rocket science. It's just a worm drive, in it. So Yeah. So that's about it. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anything? Show you anything? Next week we can do control. I can give you an app and you can just actually control it. Oh, does it work through the cloud? Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Did that. So I had the client running on a cloud instance, controlling cameras on site, and we were remoted into the cloud instance. And yeah, just a little bit more latency, but nothing you couldn't live with once you adjust to it. It's just like anything, learning a new skill. Yeah. Can't think of anything else cool that I wanted to show. That's really about it. So if nobody else has any other questions, next week. All right. So that's going to do it for What Makes It Tick this week. Next week, it's a surprise. I hope. Brandon's working on it. We're close. So close. Can't wait. So yeah, I'm really excited. We got some really big things happening that we've pivoted on. So look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks everybody for showing up and hanging out. And absolutely look forward to seeing you next week.